thank you all for being here. As I just said, my name is Will Magruder. I'm Vice President of Partnerships at MassChallenge. Been in this role for about 5 years now, and I'm really excited to be joined today on this panel with three people that are very important members of our broader MassChallenge community and also our partner community from BAE and Foley Hoag, and then one of the founders that's been through our program. And these are two of our longest standing partners, as well as one of our most involved founders that has been through multiple MassChallenge programs. So I'm excited to kind of share how our mission impacts all of these organizations and how having all of them as a part of our community makes a strong and vibrant place to scale and grow a business and also support corporate innovation strategy at the same time. So I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves individually. So we'll just get started. Sarah, I'd love to hear about your role at BAE and how you see yourself fitting into the innovation ecosystem as a whole.
Sure. Thank you, everyone, for coming. My name is Sarah Scharf. I work for BAE Systems. We are a very large international commercial and defense company. We make everything from EV buses to army tanks to some cyber security, things like that. So we have a couple of different sectors. We also do a little bit of aerospace as well. And so my role is to find innovative startup and small business technology that might be of interest to us, not through acquisition or investment, but through partnerships and collaborations, and to try to work with those companies to help them grow their technology and for us to help us grow our technology as well.
Great. Kanwar, go ahead.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Kanwar Singh. 2 things before I begin. So first off, I've been having so much fun at South by Southwest. You could probably hear that in my voice. I promise you, this is not how I typically sound. And secondly, I just have to have a quick disclaimer because I also serve in the U.S. military as a reserve in the Massachusetts National Guard. So these are my views and not the official views of the United States government or the Department of Defense or the National Guard in general. We have been tremendous beneficiaries of the innovation ecosystem led by MassChallenge. I do live in Boston. So about 7 years ago, I got a phone call from the Pentagon, and I was a second lieutenant at the time. And they said, "Hey, Lieutenant Singh," it was a colonel on the other side, "I need your help to commercialize some technologies that are critical for national security." And my question was, "Sir, are you asking me or are you telling me?" And he said, "Lieutenant Singh, you're a commissioned officer of the U.S. Army. Go figure it out, Lieutenant." And I said, "Yes, sir. Moving, sir." So that's how I ended up starting Skyline Nav AI. And it's very, very hard to do deep tech commercialization and to get out of the lab. But thanks to MassChallenge and BAE Systems, who's actually one of our customers now, we have now been able to commercialize our technology and eventually get it at the hands of as many people who wear the uniform like I do on weekends when I'm not, working as the CEO of Skyline Nav AI. And I'm happy to talk about the struggles, the successes that we've had to the extent I can. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kanwar. And Mark, we'll go to you to wrap us up.
So, hi, everyone. I'm Mark Haddad. I'm a partner at the law firm Foley Hoag. Our firm is focused on the innovation economy and high-stakes litigation. I personally, my practice, I'm a corporate lawyer, really fits into 3 buckets. I serve as outside general counsel for all sorts of high-growth, venture-funded startup companies. I also represent a lot of VCs in their investments in those companies, and so I've got a both sides of the table perspective. And I also spend a lot of time doing M&A, both sell side with startups that I've worked with through sort of their full life cycle, and also buy side, often with clients that we worked with as startups, and now they're big public companies that are buying other startups. So, I like to say we're not all things to all people, but for a technology-based startup company, we try to have everything that you need under one roof for a full life cycle practice.
Great. Thank you. And Mark, I'm going to hit it right back to you for a question, just to kind of set the framework for our, broader discussion here. We're focused on tough tech and global innovation. So, sometimes the word tough tech can feel a little ambiguous and very broad. So I'd love to hear from our panelists, like, when you hear that word or that phrase, like, what is it that you would think of and what it means to, innovation and working with your startup founders?
Sure. So I think there are probably, you could ask 10 people and you get 10 different definitions of tough tech. The way I think about it is someone who's solving a really challenging problem with truly breakthrough technology that hasn't been done before. So there's a lot more technology risk, right? You can start a very successful software business. You just have to know the right market you're attacking. It's people know how to make software. You just have to make the right product. Or you could start a business that takes existing technologies like robotics and applies it to a new customer need. And it's not technology risk. It's sort of market risk. But with tough tech, there's like really significant technology risk first and foremost, because you're doing something that nobody's done before.
Yeah, great. And Sarah, I'll come to Conwar last. Like, you're part of a multi-billion-dollar organization that you could say has succeeded in building tough tech. So, like, how do you think about that term?
I too think it is ambiguous and very broad. That is definitely a very hard question to answer. So, I echo the sentiments over that it is trying to tackle tough challenges and very tough problems. Not always succeeding, but just attempting to succeed at that and tackling things that nobody else wants to.
And so, Conwar, you have the hard job because you're actually trying to scale a tough tech company. So what does that term mean to you? And, how do you use it in, pitching what you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, first off, I have a lot of friends, thanks to communities like MassChallenge, who are startup founders themselves. And anyone here have ever run a company, or you're an entrepreneur, just by show of hands? Yeah, many of you all know how hard it is to run a company, right? You're responsible for everything. I may have a fancy title as a CEO, but Saturday nights, I'm running payroll or reviewing patent documents with our legal help or whatever, right? So you're kind of doing everything. Being the CEO, co-founder of a tough tech company is like just 10x that, right? Because there is no demand for what you're building right away. Perhaps the product is not ready. It's technically, scientifically hard. And so there have to be a lot of breakthroughs that you have to do before you can get there. The examples I like to use are GPS, for example, or mRNA vaccines. And coming from Boston, we have companies like Moderna and Pfizer there. And, they were really struggling to commercialize mRNA vaccines before the pandemic. No one cared about mRNA vaccines until the pandemic hit. And they were one of the first ones to come up with a successful vaccine that helped hopefully save a lot of lives, right? Which might be politically controversial, so maybe I shouldn't use that example. But in any event, imagine if those entrepreneurs and those scientists had not spent hours and hours working on the mRNA vaccine. Perhaps we might have still been in one of the deadliest pandemic in human history. And that's what I remind our team and engineers. We end up running into a lot of technical failures, by the way. We only have a few good days a year. We've had some recent successes where our technology has matured enough where we are getting great results. But I got to tell you, the first 3 years, we were just like banging against the wall. Why is this thing not working? Why are we not able to demonstrate success in real world? It sounded fantastic in a lab and in a classroom and in the patent documents and the scientific papers we had read, but it just wasn't working, right? But getting to a point, especially in tough tech, where now you are able to demonstrate success, your clients like BAE Systems and others use the product. And I remember one of the best days last year was when we actually got a video from BAE and we were able to demonstrate that we are able to localize the imagery that's coming in, which, by the way, we have published on our website. We were like, this actually works, right? So that's what I think of tough tech, Will.
Yeah.
And from that perspective.
No, that's great. And, Clark, I'm going to go back to you. I know, in your role in this ecosystem, like, you are often an advisor to these tough tech companies when they might feel like they're never going to get out of the lab. And so as you think about the challenges from, lab to actually commercializing a project or a product, like, what are some of the things that, you've seen founders deal with in terms of challenges and, maybe any strategies for overcoming those same challenges?
Sure. Yeah. Unfortunately, there's a lot of challenges. So first of all, going from something that is a lab scale technology to something that can be commercially used in the field often is a big shift that founders don't always realize, because what works in the lab versus what works out in the real world and real world conditions is a big leap. And another big challenge is sort of because you're doing something so new, it's finding the right first customers and even finding the right first market. Right? You might actually have a huge market that's available to you, but that is more risk averse. And you might have to find a first initial market that's smaller, that is a little bit more ready to be a first customer. I think one of the best strategies you could use, and I think the other panelists could probably talk about this a lot more, is, a lot of our clients end up with some strategic who's either a first pilot customer or an investor or both. And those really help to sort of make sure that you're building a product that the customer wants, and also that you've got sort of this entree to a first customer who is willing to be a little bit of the guinea pig because, they feel like there's a real market need.
Yeah. And, Sarah, I think that's probably a good place to kind of transition to how you think about this, as serving as a technology scout for BAE Systems. I know in our, 5 years of working together, you're pretty clear that, you're mostly not trying to acquire technology. You're trying to find use cases for technology. So, that's often, that silver bullet that a founder is looking for. So how do you, feel that you can contribute to this commercialization challenge?
Oh, yeah. Well, definitely. So many times when I go to events and conferences and whatnot, and people come up and they say, how do I talk to BAE? Where do I even start? And I say, great, talk to me. That's the hardest part, I think, is for anybody trying to get into a very large company is where do I even start? What do I even do? And, so obviously coming to events like this and reaching out and then, doing a lot of hustling and whatnot is sort of I hate to say is a good start. What were some of...
Well, so I guess, one question just to build on this, like, how many companies here do you think you kind of even entertain, the idea of what their technology be capable of and, try to, connect the dots to where it could have a linkability to the, BAE mission needs, innovation strategy, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, there are two of us that do this tech scouting role. And if you don't see me, you see my coworker everywhere. And we really try to be the biggest internal champions for any startup and any tech that comes along our way. So BAE Systems as a whole does quite a lot of things. And so, we will talk to every founder and hear whatever they're doing and then really try to find some insertion point for them internally and try to connect them to that, because we like to think that there might be some, even if we're not going to acquire your technology, maybe if we don't need exactly what you have, but you have something, some component or something that you're working on that, even if we can benefit you, maybe you're going for a SBIR, a small business innovative research grant, maybe we can even just help you on that. We can help you write a letter of recommendation or other things. So I like to think that we talk to a lot of companies a year, and we really try to help as many as we can, because I have been in a startup before, and I know how incredibly difficult it is to find customers and partners and collaborators and things like that. So
yeah, great, thank you. And so Padwar, having had to navigate this yourself, I imagine you think back on the days when you were truly just in a lab, and now, you're trying to do more and more stuff in the field. How do you think about, those challenges and how you've overcome them, and maybe how partners like Foley Hoag or BAE have been a part of that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm not a lawyer by training, and I'm certainly not someone who has acquired deep tech side. I have enterprise experiences, and I have done enterprise sales, but what Mark and Sarah do are incredibly, incredibly important. I was telling Mark right before this conversation, we just filed, I think, our second patent on Saturday night, and we have a fantastic legal team we work with. And, they help us understand, well, how do you work with the patent office and what ought to be in a patent application, what sort of claims you should have in there. And, that's something I did not learn in my training. And so without IP protection and figuring out what's trade secret and what should be patented is incredibly, incredibly important, right? And then on the purchasing side, I think Sarah has a very hard job. And by the way, I think she's really good at this, because we have co-exhibited together, And there's so many people who come to her with all kinds of requests, looking for jobs, trying to sell their company, looking to get money. I'm sure you get thousands of pitches a year. And her job is to find the right tech that aligns with BAE's priorities that will actually make it into the hands of the end users and, create win-win situation for both BAE and the companies they're working with. And so I should also add, Will, MassChallenge plays an incredibly important role. This is not a paid commercial, but I do think accelerator programs, especially MassChallenge, nonprofit, zero equity, there's not many programs like that. And they're super passionate about it. Every single person I have met at MassChallenge is super passionate about helping companies, regardless of whichever sector they're in, to ensure that they're successful in whatever way they can.
Yeah, I want to add on to that too. I know, you could try to join Techstars and give up some equity. You can try to join Y Combinator, give up some equity. You could try to join Capital Factory, give up some equity. It is really hard to find a really good accelerator that you can learn from and work with and not have to give up anything. So, MassChallenge runs off of corporate partners, partially like ourselves, where we're the ones looking for the tech. And so we are the ones funding it. And so any startup can join and try to be a part of these cohorts. I mean, they even have early stage. I know you're going to say it better than me. I'm just making sure you get that there. So,
the voice of the customer is always better.
Yeah, we've loved MassChallenge forever. They have early stage accelerators that's open to a wide variety of tech, blue tech. You could probably even name all the ones. And so, trying to find the right opportunities for startups is really hard, and trying to find another company like MassChallenge is really difficult. But I encourage everybody to reach out to them. So yeah.
One quick thing I can mention. So we have gone through 5 programs at MassChallenge, and they like to call me an alum. And I hate that, because I actually do not want to be called an alum, because I want to be an active partner and member of their startup ecosystem. Because I know the moment they call me an alum, they'll take away my building access and kick me out of that program. And I don't want that at all. So,
well, appreciate those kind words. We're going a little bit off script here, but I actually did. No, this is great, though, because I actually do want to give Mark a quick chance to chime in on this, because Mark talked to the original founder of MassChallenge in 2009, before the first program had even sourced a single startup. And Mark, I just want you to kind of share a little anecdote about what that conversation was like and why you thought it was important for Foley Hoag to be involved in this.
Yeah, so I met John and Akil, the 2 founders, for the first time. They were a startup just like the rest of you. It was literally 2 guys and a pitch deck, and they were running around this networking event with their pitch deck, talking to people. And I was one of the people they talked to, and we talked about it for a while. And they, like good entrepreneurs, kept following up with me, kept keeping me updated. And then, eventually they were, had lots of perseverance, and they managed to convince a landlord right near our office to give them free space. And I said, these guys can really make something happen. And they're literally going to be down the street from us. So how can I say no to us getting involved? And so we were involved, literally from day one. We're the first sponsor, but we're very happy to have sponsors like BAE taking the torch.
That's awesome. So thanks for sharing that. So, back to our, discussion, the other thing that I think is often challenging for founders that think of themselves as, top tech innovators is there's regulatory things that need to be considered. And sometimes the very definition of tough tech, sometimes no one's done it before. So the regulations that might exist today, aren't necessarily the same regulations that are going to be put in place tomorrow, because it's an evolving landscape. And, Conor, I don't know if you can speak to this at all in terms of things that you've had to consider in your own journey from a regulatory standpoint. And then we'll, go to, Mark and Sarah after that.
I have to be careful because this session is being recorded. So I'm not going to talk about some of the things we may or may not have done. But I will say this. You're absolutely right, Bill. If you're doing something new and innovative, there's things you're probably doing that could be in that gray area. And, we tread very carefully, obviously, when that happens. And I am obviously reporting to a board. And one of the things we always talk about in our company is our mission. And so almost everyone on our team, in the founding team, has military, U.S. military or intelligence backgrounds, including me. And we always like to think about, what was the intent of some of these regulations that were put in place or might get put in place in the future. And by the way, are these regulations done right, or are they slowing us down unnecessarily because our adversaries may not have those regulations? And by the way, this is what keeps me up at night. I look at things from a national security lens, and everything we're doing at Skylight Nav AI, is to ensure America succeeds and our warfighters and our commercial markets and our allies have access to a GPS-independent navigation system. So if someone tries to take out our GPS constellation, which is extremely critical to how we live, work in our society, well then, it's going to be pretty catastrophic. And so we always have that lens. So there's some really bad people out there, by the way. And I see that, when I wear the uniform. And so we always have that lens and mindset, always we follow all the rules and we follow all the regulations, and we actually actively engage with the government when we do need help. So we've been engaging with the FAA and the FCC and a few other government bodies, and also obviously DOD, and really ensured that they're okay and comfortable, and then they'll back us up if we do end up making some mistakes or mess up.
So Mark, I think people often rely on you to be the expert in the room when it comes to these conversations. Like, how do you kind of coach founders through these evolving regulatory environments?
Yeah, so I would say the good news for my own personal life is I'm not the regulatory lawyer, but I've got a lot of good regulatory lawyers in my firm, so I steer them that way. I would say, you hit on the right point, which is, sometimes this is new technology and no one's really thought about it. And the regulation might make tons of sense for what is sort of the existing state of the art, but sometimes needs some updating for what is new technology. I will take the other side of the same coin, though. There are plenty of companies that build a business around a regulation, thinking that will lead to a successful business. And the problem with regulations is that they can be rewritten with kind of, signing a pen. And so you really need to build a business that is viable, independent of sort of regulatory incentives or regulatory restrictions your customers have that you're sort of helping to solve, so that environment can sort of supercharge what you're doing, but isn't, totally reliant on it.
And Sarah, imagine in your role, you've certainly got in-house general counsel. You're also like trying to think about how to do things differently. So you're, bridging the gap. You can see like you experience the challenges that Conmore has in a similar way, but also, we're getting advice from, lawyers on the inside as well. So like, are there regulatory things that come up in, your day-to-day that you're, aware of?
I'm sorry to say I'm not always a friend of my legal team, when they're holding up things, waiting for approval. But, this is sort of a side story, but if you've ever heard from Mike Maples, who wrote the book Pattern Breakers and is a huge investor, I think he says that when a company like Lyft first came to him and they said, well, I think what we want to do is actually illegal. I don't know if we're going to be able to have people take their own cars and pick people up. And Mike Maples said, sign me up, and I think that like the companies like that, like Airbnb going, well, I think I want to rent out a room. I don't even know if this is legal or not, and to think like how much the world has changed on people who started companies not even knowing if it's even regulatory compliant in any way, so, to even like Waymo or, the new robo-taxis, the new Tesla robo-taxis that are coming. I don't think they weren't sitting around and waiting for the city or the state to say, to give them permission. It's maybe more ask for forgiveness and ask for permission. I don't know. So, take all these is not the views of my company, but of just observations that I've made and real big game changers and how they've been managed to kind of go around regulations.
One of the things I'll just quickly mention is when you're leading a team, you really have an ethical and moral obligation to do the right thing. The poster child for that is companies like Theranos and others that were just blatantly lying. There was another company, I think it was called Charlie. JP Morgan ended up acquiring them, found out they had basically made up a database of customers. And I think these founders ought to be in jail. They really ought to be. Because, look, there's bad apples in every profession. And so I always tell founders, do not cut corners. Do the right thing. If you're in a gray area, talk to people. Have conversations. Ensure that you have a good understanding of what the ethical boundaries are. And you ought to hold yourself to those high standards. I tell my team, if they raise a concern, and look, I'm the head of HR at Skyline AI. There is no HR department because we're a small team. But if they have any concerns at any point, they can come talk to me and they can talk to our board, and there'll be no consequences of that because we really want to hold ourselves to the highest standards possible. The last thing we want is the United States national security or our mission as a country or as a private sector being impacted because of things that we messed up on.
Great. Thank you. So I'm going to pivot a little bit to, funding. And this is often like a critical milestone when it comes to tough tech companies. I was actually at an investor conference a couple weeks ago, and there were 3 panelists up there. And I eventually raised my hand to ask a question at the end, which, by the way, I encourage all of you to think of some questions, just will save some time. But one panelist said it's really hard to be a dual-use company and early. And if you're not familiar with dual use, that's an expression used to describe a company that has a commercial use case, but also some applicability to a mission need within the DoD most often. The other founder said you should never be just a defense, or the other panelist said you should never be just a defense company. And the third panelist said the easiest way to get money when you're early is through the SBIR program within the DoD. So I'm sitting here thinking to myself, all right, so I can't be early in dual use and I can't be just a defense company, but I should try to go get money from the DoD because that's the easiest capital to get. So I use that as a setup to just say there's a lot of ways that you can find capital to support your business. There's different kind of costs, if you will, associated with that capital. Conor, how did you think about finding early capital, and how do you maybe think about where your next source of capital is going to come from?
So we got lucky in a lot of respects. It wasn't hard work. It really, truly was luck. We ended up getting connected with the Army Research Lab and the researchers that had built the technology. Now, it wasn't commercially ready, but they had done a lot of thinking and had spent a lot of time and money and resources, which was our taxpayer dollars, by the way, that had built the technology, which we ended up licensing from the US government. So we had that going for us, number one. Number two, we also got lucky because this was in 2021 and 2022, where we got non-dilutive money from the US government. Government, and I think of the US taxpayers as seed investors in Skyline AI Inc. And so I think it's gotten a lot harder to get DoD non-dilutive money since then, because when the VC markets dried up, everyone started running towards R&D money. And so I think the odds have come down significantly of being able to get non-dilutive money from DoD. But I always encourage that. So I think the third piece where we got lucky was we were able to leverage being at the right place at the right time and having access to critical funding to build the product. And when it was ready, thanks to MassChallenge and being at the right place at the right time, we ended up running into some commercial customers. They're like, we want to buy what you have done and use that product, right? And so if these things had not happened, you probably would not have been business.
Yeah. And, Mark, I know you and your team have a deep network of venture capitalists and investors that, you can help introduce founders that, you're advising to. So what have been your observations about kind of the, appetite for funding tough tech recently, and, how you've been able to, help founders in that sense?
Yeah, I would say, tough tech is a lot harder place to get funding than kind of your typical, vertical SaaS company or AI company. A lot of times what's really useful is, if you've got a strategic investor coupled with financial investors, right? The strategic sort of gives some market validation, but you also don't necessarily want a company where the strategic is your only investor and has sort of too much control. And there's a lot of things to sort of balance out there when you structure that. But that in tough tech especially ends up being very valuable because, again, there's technology risk, but then you've also got, after the technology risk, you've still got the market risk. And it's hard to disprove the market risk without already having the product developed and in the field, and you can't do that without the funding. And so the strategics can really come in and help validate what you're doing. And similarly, angel investors can also be, angels that know the industry, believe in what you're doing, kind of understand the real problem and validate for other investors.
Great. And, Sarah, I know you and your team are not specifically investing in startups, taking an equity stake, but there are definitely ways that you can help get them connected to capital. So, what are some of your strategies for supporting businesses like Comar?
Oh, sure. Yes. So I will say I've seen a surprising amount of new venture dollars going into dual use defense tech. All kinds of theses that go up. We only invest in veteran-owned companies, or we only invest in women-owned companies, or other things like that. And so there have been some really good venture capital firms coming along trying to offer capital to a variety of different companies that may not have been able to get funding before. And then also there is, you think about I don't even know how to even get SBIR money from the government. Well, the Air Force's SBIR funds they have very, very broad open topics. You'd be surprised some of the tech that you might be able to somehow spin to have a little bit of defense application to it that somebody like Air Force might even fund. And so, don't feel like your tech has to be explicitly for government defense only. Consider looking at money from AFWorks or DARPA. DARPA funds all kinds of weird, crazy ideas that may not even be theoretically possible. And there are agencies out there that will help you with SBIRs, such as SBIR advisors, other agencies like that do they do take a little bit of your fund. If you get awarded, they do take a little bit of it, but they help you actually even apply in the first place when you wouldn't even know where to start. And so, sometimes if we see really good technology, we do try to help them. We won't write your SBIR for you, but we will maybe write a letter of support. Or if you even are successful and lucky and you get a higher SBIR, there's phase 1, there's phase 2, there's higher. We will even try to work with you in some of the higher phases and develop your tech with you. And then also, we might know, we do work with a couple of different venture capital firms. They pass along, hey, we were looking at this really good company, we're investing in, we think they'd be great for you. They pass them along to us. And then sometimes we do the same where, somebody says, hey, I'm looking for some funding. We might pass them along to some of the people in our network. I mean, we can't guarantee that they will fund you or anything, but it's always nice to just have connections.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, one other thing that maybe you could comment quickly, Sarah, there's budgets for internal research and development efforts too. So how have you guys identified, opportunities to use those types of funds?
Yeah, I mean, obviously sitting right next to me, Comor here is a perfect example. So how we first got connected was MassChallenge offered to do a mentorship program for us, and we took them up on that offer, and we'll do one again this year. So if you follow the MassChallenge website, you'll see that posted. And so they posted publicly today, anybody want to come work with BE? They're going to offer a mentorship. And obviously, since Comor has been through a lot of accelerators, he saw that announcement. I think we probably even connected with you through some of those accelerators anyway. And so he won one of our mentorship slots last year. And so we worked with him on a regular basis to try to figure out where could his tech be inserted. And then at the end of that, we were able to find some internal research and development funds to be able to give him a little bit to continue that partnership, just to develop tech a little bit further until we could try to grow that relationship, to even apply for some external government funding to grow that even more. So yes, it doesn't, he's been a great example. I can't say it happens with every company, but we're really happy when our internal scientists and engineers can try to apply for some internal funding to be able to work with a startup or small business.
Great. Thank you. Mark, I'm going to start with you for this next question. I think being a successful tough tech company requires building the right team. And, sometimes you start with a technical founder. Sometimes it's more like a serial entrepreneur that's like great at the go-to-market strategy. Like, how have you seen maybe like through both of those very basic lenses, like teams evolve and like come together and gel and ultimately scale a successful tough tech venture?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I don't think it's so different in tough tech than it is in startups generally, other than tough tech sometimes needs a lot more variety of technology disciplines, because a lot of times you're kind of bringing together some new things that need, more than just one person is gonna know the right technology. But I mean, first and foremost, it's sort of teams that are complementing each other's, right? So it's sort of, if you're the founder CEO, you've got to find the teammates that sort of fill the weaknesses that you have, whatever those are, and be able to work together. But I think first and foremost, out of everything, it's like the biggest thing, frankly, is perseverance. Like, this is not an easy thing to do, and almost every startup is going to hit some big bump in the road, and you need to know that you've got people that have sort of the constitution to stick to it and get through that.
Right. And Conor, how have you thought about this? Like, you've probably had a few people come and go from the team. You've had a few people be there basically from the beginning. You're probably thinking every day about who's going to be my next hire. So like, what's your strategy around building a team?
I really like what Mark mentioned, perseverance. I actually have that on my business card. The courage to persist matters more than success or failure in life. And I remind that to our team every single day. And I think there was a panel earlier today that talked about how perhaps immigrants end up being, more successful because of all the crazy stuff we've had to deal with in our lives. I was not born in the United States. I immigrated here at 17. And so, just going through cultural assimilation and all of that, took a while. But the reason I say this is there's going to be a lot of roadblocks along the way. Bill, to your point, technical challenges, people coming and leaving. I think we've hired two, heads of business development, and both of those didn't work out. We're still in good terms with both of them, and I'm always looking to hire someone who can help us accelerate our sales piece. And it becomes hard because we haven't raised VC money, by the way. So that limits, who's interested in joining a company in that regard. The final thing I'll mention, when I tried to join the U.S. military, I was rejected 16 times simply because of the way I look, because of my article of faith and my religious beliefs. And I kept knocking on the door and I said, hey, as an American, you can't reject me simply because of the way I look and my religious belief. And they kept turning me down. And I kept going back because I knew that was the right thing to do. And after, I think they were so sick and tired of me, they finally learned, we got to let this guy in. I have the same mindset, as a startup CEO. We've been trying to work with some clients for years. But you know what? I still call on them. Hey, I'm here. Where are you? It's like waking up at, 5 or 6 or whatever and working out in the morning, right? And it's hard. There are days you're like, oh, I hate this. I don't want to do this. I'm an engineer by trade. So being on this panel and talking to all of you is not something I would have done before, but I know how important this is to spread the word and encourage folks to contribute towards national security and dual use and contribute to the ecosystem. And that's why I do these things. But persistence is, to Mark's point, the most important skill set in my view that I think a startup CEO or a founding team has to have. You cannot give up when you're running into obstacles.
Yeah. And, Sarah, thank you, Conor. Very inspired. I'll pose a similar but different question to you. Oftentimes this, in my role at MassChallenge, trying to connect organizations like BAE to, promising startups. The one thing I've always thought of, especially as it relates to, what you do is, you're trying to find, novel technologies that fill a capability gap. And the best case scenario is we find a startup that, you can plug into a program of record. The worst case scenario is you do that and then that startup ceases to exist. And, that creates a major problem. And so I imagine as you're assessing which startups are the right ones for BAE to work with, like looking at the team is an important part of that calculus of whether or not this project or this, technology is the right one to work with long term. And so just how do you think about a startup team, and like what looks like good to you?
It's a great question. Thank you. So, working with any big defense company will be a really, really, really slow process. You may meet us. We may call you back in 6 months. We may find something next year. And so, you definitely cannot rely on working with a big prime to be your only success. And so, since it is a long process, obviously the ones that are still succeeding despite our best efforts are the ones that will go on to succeed in the long run. And so, maybe just by process of elimination, by the fact that how long it is, if they're still around when we're ready in a year, 2 years, 3 years, that shows their perseverance. I would say also there have been some startups where we've talked to them and then they kind of fall off the record and they didn't send us the deck they were supposed to, which always surprises me, or they didn't follow up, which is, surprising. Maybe there were other reasons why, maybe if I look them up, they don't exist now. But, with Conlar, I mean, he's been one of our best examples of a perfect partnership. And what I have noticed with him is that he's not just waiting on us, he's always looking for opportunities for both of us to work together. So yes, we are always looking for new opportunities, new programs, new customers, but so is he for our partnership. He's been actually coming to us, he being the small startup and us being the multi-billion-dollar company. And he's saying, hey, did you see this solicitation? Can we work together on it? Hey, I am going to this conference. I want to talk about our partnership there. Is that okay? Hey, I'm going to apply for this funding and I want you to help me on it. And I mean, we don't see that a lot in founders. And we're actually very happy to support that. I mean, maybe not all companies are like that, but it is surprisingly that how much he has been able to benefit us besides just us benefiting him, and yeah, he emails a lot, but I think he always has good updates. He's always like, hey, I just wanted to let you know I'm going to be at this event, or I'm going to be talking here, or, we just released this new version of our product, which is great. We love hearing from him, but how much, he's hustling and benefiting us as much as we're benefiting him. So that's a great example of a perfect CEO.
That's great. Appreciate it. So we have about 10 minutes left. I have a few more questions I can go to, but we do want to make this interactive. I see our first volunteer in the back there, so I'd like to hear what's on your mind.
Commercialization consultant. I actually mentor for MassChallenge for several years. Traditionally, D-Tech or Tough Tech or whatever you want to call it, takes longer, costs more from your limited. So traditionally, people go to get the SDIR, or pursue it anyway. But obviously, there's been some changes. We don't have a federal budget right now. SDIR funding is sort of up in the air. And they've added a Section 174, which actually is a tax that is kind of new. And my question to you guys is the private sector ready to, they have the slack if SDIR gets cut or gets reduced, or the burden of the new taxation is just, turns people away because they are opportunity?
I mean, I can't say I've seen I would say I've actually seen an increase in venture capital funding for dual use and defense. Maybe it's just me. I mean, 8 VC and their $1 billion round they just raised. I mean, obviously not everybody going to be a 8 VC funded company. I mean, even little ones that I've seen. So I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I feel like I've seen VCs picking up the slack a little bit. I've even this last year attended conferences geared towards VC funding towards defense and dual use. And maybe you're bootstrapping it too. I would say also, maybe SBIR funding is slow right now, but I don't think it's going away. And I think it'll still be there in the long run and stay flat or pick back up again.
Just real quick on that point, I was in DC last week, and Joni Ernst hosted a panel, and she's introducing a new bill right now to increase SBIR funding. So hopefully it's here to stay, but I understand you're concerned about the current environment. Let's go to another question over here.
Right. I guess hope everyone can hear me. So, 2 times Australia a night, not yet 5 times, I guess. And also a member of Capital Factory, so we gave up our person. Right. I guess the question I have is also somewhat related to HSBR, chaos, and also the VC thing. I think the VC funding issue is that VC funding overall has not recovered. I mean, even though there might be like a marginal increase in VC funding for dual-use technology in this environment. But overall, I think it's always like 4 times the pre-capitalization on your post. So that is what led a lot of us to SBIRs, including us. We received an NSF phase 1. Our phase 2 was finally on the verge of being processed, and now like a program director we were working with is not with NSF anymore. So, I mean, you guys do interface with DC, have some idea of what's going on. So is there some scope for things settling down in the next imminent few months? Is there anything that you have gleaned that you can tell people that it is situation?
I don't think it'll settle down the next few months, but I mean, we were seeing some of that fluctuation ourselves too. I'd be curious that data that you're seeing about the drop in VC funding and whether that is across the board or if there are certain areas that are decreasing more than others. Because I mean, maybe my own experience, I haven't seen that.
Okay, in the blue, go ahead. We'll cut you right after.
I get the number of brilliant colleagues who are looking at the social implications of technology. An example you probably are familiar with the early emojis and realize that people have the need for skin colors. Another colleague is looking at the DoD cybernetically engineers soldiers like see at night what would be the implications when they leave the military. Also, other really interesting issues. And it seemed to me that tech companies would benefit from every tech company from having someone like that on board. And I wondered if you were aware of any tech companies that include scholars who are thinking about the social implications of such a technology that you created.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very important question that you ask. And we certainly are very mindful of the downside of potential tech development. And that's something I think about a lot. And again, it ties to what I was mentioning earlier. We are a small team and I don't have the budget to invest in outside advisors or coach us on these things. But, we work very closely with different experts in the field. MIT is a good example of that because they're, in Boston, which is where we are based out of. And some of the research you're citing on skin color and stuff, they had done a lot of work in that regard. And so I think at the end of the day, the team, the companies that are building these technologies have to keep the end goal in mind as they're building stuff. I will say this, we certainly, I think in the United States, have more self-imposed restrictions as we should because of what we believe in. I'll use China as an example, right? They have a lot more surveillance going on and CCTVs. I was in Abu Dhabi a few weeks ago, and apparently they have 3 CCTVs on every single block in the country. And they track you, the moment you enter the airport, all the way up. And it was just outstanding. I mean, it was crazy for me. I don't think anyone in America would agree with that. So I think typically speaking, most companies that I know of are very mindful of downsides of how our tech can be used. And I think there's only small exceptions that I mentioned earlier of people just screwing up because they're greedy or, they're just being selfish.
Mark, any quick thought on like unintended downsides of tough tech and like how you might just caution founders? Just curious. We'll move on to our last question there.
Yeah, I don't really have a good specific on that.
No worries. All right, we'll go to the Yankees fan in the back.
Yikes.
That's Daisy. So, a veteran as well, Air Force veteran. So, with that mantra being said, as far as doing more with less in venture capital, right? So, we all know, being in a space, that it's not a quick turnaround. It's not an easy process. It's sometimes, and just access to the information can be difficult. are we looking at different ways from a higher level to push ways to do things cheaper, smarter, faster, maybe collaborations with other countries who are doing it cheaper, faster, just because there's a pipeline clogged with venture capital and any capital that comes for free. So just other ways, is there like a conversation that's happening at a higher level of other ways to kind of unclog that bottleneck?
First of all, thank you for your service. I've seen a little more international collaboration. You know, the NATO Diana program is one example. If you all aren't familiar with it, it's open to startups across I think you have to be in a NATO nation to do it. Well, that's actually, yeah, if you want to talk about NATO, MassChallenge is one of the NATO Diana programs. And that is actually, maybe you could provide some insight on international. And then actually MassChallenge did just open up an office in the UK. And so you could probably actually more speak.
So I guess real quick, just on, MassChallenge, well, Mark told a little anecdote about being founded in the, Boston area. Michelle's here running our, Texas program, which is alive and well. We also have a managing director in Switzerland and another managing director in Israel that run accelerator programs. And really from day one, it was about connecting an international network of innovators. And so we continue to this day to, chase that mission of having founders come from anywhere, doing anything. And even though, a lot of our U.S. or a lot of our partners are based in the U.S., like we'll see 20% of the startups come from, other countries every year. So, we're absolutely trying to, keep that, initial vision alive and well. And to Sarah's point about NATO Diana, a couple things. One is, I think, MassChallenge, when we first engaged in NATO discussions, we had been doing this for, 13 years. So we had a track record of running successful accelerator programs for emerging technologies, especially for, those really young companies. Second, we had been already doing work through the U.S. Air Force, primarily through a relationship with Hanscom Air Force Base, helping founders transition from a phase 1 to a phase 2 SBIR, STTR. So those two things combined, and then with the support of our partner in bidding on that work at MIT, we were ultimately awarded not just a contract to advise on designing the curriculum to support founders, that would be accepted to the NATO Diana program, but also the operating partner for supporting a subset of that group out of our Boston office. So today, there are, I think, 77 startups in the 2025 NATO program across 13 sites. And, we're proud to, be one of those organizations. So one more quick question, and then we got to get wrapped up.
Hi, my name is Urban, Texas, Oxford.
Come on up.
My bad, I lost my voice, but there's the Urban, Texas entrepreneurship. How can I and the university kind of build this ecosystem so support international founders, some like MBA programs that come in for undergrad? So I work with all of them.
Yes.
It's really important to like, get past that culture, give them this confidence.
Yeah. You know what? It's almost like you were a plant, because my last question for all three of these panelists before we wrap up here was, as you think about building an ecosystem around tough tech ventures and the importance of being networked and getting to, connected to the right people, what types of organizations and events are you most focused on supporting? So, I think this will get right at your point there. So I'll start with Sarah and we'll end with Mark.
So I can try to answer that with the spin of university partnerships and relationships. So, I feel like all these different organizations and programs that are coming out of, I'm going to use some UT and some Texas A&M examples because, go Texas. But anyway, these didn't exist when I was going to school many years ago. But it's amazing to see, and it's great. And so I hope that every university is doing what UT is doing. Their Discovery to Impact, some of their, like the Brumley labs. I don't even know if I can name them all, but all these different robotics clubs and different challenges and opportunities and hackathons and everything that universities are doing and going above and beyond just providing an education, but resources for entrepreneurs. I mean, I think you can even like major in entrepreneurship at UT, and I don't even think that major would have ever been anywhere before. And so, I know Austin Community College is starting to do some opportunities like that, and Texas A&M has a whole new innovation arm, and they're trying to work with more startups, and so it's great to see. And I think that they are starting to get the attention of corporate sponsors and corporate partners. And at UT is the Kendra Scott Entrepreneurship Foundation. I'm doing a terrible job of naming these. I don't even work at UT. I'm sure that some of you in the audience may know more than me. It's amazing, and maybe it's just a matter of getting the word out there. And it's funny, I did go to a UT career fair, and I was trying to bring people to come and work for BAE, but it was funny when a founder came up to me, and the student came up and said, I'm looking for a job at BAE, but I also, here's my startup. I'm thinking, I was like, oh, tell me about your startup. It was almost very interesting to hear what all these people are working on, more than just what job they're looking for. So I'd like to think it's growing. I mean, I guess I didn't give you an example of where to go from there, other than just I'm encouraged by what I'm saying. I'm sorry.
You guys are just starting about bringing out commutes. So
Yeah. All right. So we're going to wrap up so we can get to the upstairs. But Conor, real quick, like as you think about supporting groups and events, like what's top of mind for you?
Look, absolutely. We need more dual-use innovators. We do need more folks in the ecosystem, and that's why whenever I get an invite to come talk about my experience, I do it through MassChallenge or MIT or any other venue out there, because we do need the best people working on the hardest challenges, because it's going to all keep us safe and secure and prosperous in the long run. The one thing I'll mention, depending on the stage of the company, yes, there are a lot of these early stage programs that do exist. I've actually found value in industry specific organizations, and we are part of a few of them now. And, that's where we have met a lot of people who are subject matter experts. One of my favorite ones, because we are in the navigation space, is the Institute of Navigation. And it looks like how you have Comic-Con? That's how I explain Institute of Navigation. It's Comic-Con, but for GPS nerds. I mean, some of the things they talk about, I'm like, that's amazing. And you guys are thinking about that. And a lot of that stuff would never leave the lab. But it gives me ideas, it gives me connections, it gets me to connect with other teams and people. And this whole tough tech space has to be collaborative, because no one can solve our society's hardest challenges by themselves. And so the more we collaborate with others, I think the more success we'll have in this ecosystem.
Mark, you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, so I would just add to everything that they said. I think the additional thing would be finding a good group of successful entrepreneurs who can help mentor that next generation of first-time entrepreneurs, right? It's hard enough to do this. It's really hard when you're kind of making it all up and you've never done it before. And then, having somebody you can talk to that's been through it before, understands what you're going through, can be hugely valuable. And that's another kind of thing that MassChallenge really brings to its startups.
Get the legal help.
Yes. All right. Well, on that note, I'm going to wrap us up real quick. But before I do that, could the folks from Foley Hoag please raise their hands that are, here with us today? Thank you. So, Mark is obviously up here representing the team, but we are so grateful for, Foley helping to make this all possible and bringing us all here to be able to support Texas House and be an important part of your experience here at South by Southwest. So thank you to our longest standing partner, Foley Hoag. We're grateful for everything you've done over the last 15 years, and especially today. So Mark, I'll give you the last word if there's anything you'd like to say to wrap us up.
Time for some drinks.
What it is